Settle in with a cup of tea and your imagination. This is Detective Duo, where every clue finds its place, just as Tommy and Tuppence would have insisted. Don't forget to subscribe and tell us where in the world you're joining from. Tuppence burst through the office door with such velocity that the bell above it gave a frightened jangle, and the pot of violets on the windowsill trembled in protest. Tommy looked up from the typewriter, halfway through a sentence he'd already lost interest in, and blinked at the sight of his wife standing rigidly in the doorway, arm extended like a triumphant messenger of doom. "Tommy," she declared, "you will not believe what the postmistress just handed me." "Is it a bill? Because I'm afraid I've reached my emotional limit for those this week." "It's a telegram." "That's worse," he said, sitting up straighter. "Who's died?" "No one. Yet." She swept across the room in 3 efficient strides and thrust the yellow slip into his hand. "Read." Tommy accepted it with the wariness of someone presented with a live eel. Their Bloomsbury office suddenly felt smaller, its familiar scent of furniture polish and old ink deepening the sense that their quiet morning had cracked open. He unfolded the telegram. "Operation Dollhouse compromised. Retrieve the sparrow before it sings at midnight." Tommy exhaled a single dry laugh. "Absolutely not." "Absolutely yes," Tuppence countered, pacing already. "Read the signature line." He squinted. "There isn't one, just a smudge." "My point exactly." She snatched it back and examined it under the angled desk lamp. "Look at the handwriting on the address. That curl on the B, I've seen that before. Years ago." Tommy leaned back, steepling his fingers. "Tuppence, my love, you have a remarkable talent for seeing conspiracies in the grain of a tablecloth." "Not conspiracies, patterns." She tapped the telegram. "This pattern is from our early days. The liaison who briefed us during—" "No," Tommy said instantly. "He retired. Then he moved to Devon to raise sheep, very dull sheep. His words." "People who retire rarely send coded warnings involving birds singing at midnight." Tommy put the telegram down as though it might start ticking. The room felt different now, its benign clutter suddenly positioned like props in a stage play waiting for a drama they had not yet rehearsed. "What did the postmistress say?" Tommy asked. "Oh, she was in a state. Kept insisting it was meant for Mrs. Beresford, but not our Mrs. Beresford." Tuppence scoffed. "As though there were another in London worth sending cryptic threats to." "Maybe it was meant for someone else entirely." "It wasn't." She thumped her handbag onto the desk and began rooting through it, producing the telegram envelope. "Look at this." She pointed to a tiny symbol near the flap, a minuscule pair of interlocking circles barely visible. "That is a location code." Tommy frowned. "A location code we haven't used since we stopped wearing ghastly trench coats and reporting to gloomy basements." "Exactly." She tossed the envelope aside triumphantly. "Someone wants us to know this is meant for us." "Or someone wants to make us think it is." Tuppence paused, considering that. "Either way," she said slowly, "someone is reaching back into our old spy days. Someone who knows far too much." Tommy rose from the desk and crossed to the filing cabinet near the window. He ran his hand along its familiar metal surface, then tugged open the bottom drawer. It groaned like an elderly relative disturbed from a nap. "We haven't opened this drawer in ages," he murmured. Tuppence came to stand beside him. Years. Inside were files yellowed at the edges, a few notebooks bound with twine, and something else, a small brown envelope lying neatly atop a stack of reports, as though it had been placed there recently despite the dust. Tommy lifted it. On the back of the seal was the same tiny symbol. Tuppence inhaled sharply. "I knew it. I knew that symbol meant something." Tommy did not open the envelope immediately. Instead, he turned it over in his hands like a relic dredged from the bottom of a cold river. "When did we find this?" "During the clean-out last winter. You said it probably contained an old grocery list and would ruin our marriage with disappointment." "That does sound like me." "And I said we should leave it until we were ready." Tommy flicked the seal with his thumb. "Are we ready now?" Tuppence looked directly at him. "Yes." The envelope gave with a soft crack. Inside was a single slip of cream paper, folded twice. Tommy unfolded it. One line was written on it in a confident, looping hand. "If this reaches you, it means the dollhouse has reopened." Tommy stared at it. Tuppence whispered, "This is no coincidence." Tommy walked to the centre of the room, letter dangling between his fingers. So someone smuggled this into our cabinet months ago, waited until we forgot about it, and only now sends a telegram. Yes, Tuppence said matter-of-factly. It means the situation is escalating, or someone is escalating it for us. He sat down heavily in his chair. Tuppence resumed pacing, this time with sharper strides, reading the telegram aloud under her breath for the 8th time. Retrieve the sparrow before it sings at midnight. What does that even mean? Who, or what, is the sparrow? A person? A code name? An object? A location? A threat? Tommy rubbed his temple. Well, if this is a prank, it's a very well-organized one. Tuppence stopped pacing. Tommy, think. Sparrow. Sparrow. She closed her eyes. That was the code name for an enemy courier during that mess in Vienna, wasn't it? No, wait. No, Sparrow was the decoy. The real courier was... Finch, Tommy supplied. Yes, Finch. Sparrow was created to throw us off. She snapped her fingers. So if someone wants us to chase a sparrow now, they want us distracted. Or they want us dead. Tuppence resumed pacing. Why bring back a dead operation? Dollhouse. She tasted the word. That was the one involving those miniature models, hollow staircases, secret compartments. The whole thing was absurd. And dangerous, Tommy added. Someone was smuggling microfilm out of safe houses using children's dolls. Tuppence looked at the telegram again. Tommy, this isn't nostalgia. This is a warning from someone who knows exactly what they're doing. The office clock gave a slow, stubborn tick, then another. The air seemed to tighten. Tommy walked back to the desk and picked up the telegram. It's the handwriting that bothers me. You're right, it does look familiar, but I can't place it. Because it's old handwriting, Tuppence said impatiently, from someone we've not seen in years, someone who disappeared from MI5 quietly. Tommy raised an eyebrow. Retired? No, disappeared. She leaned forward. Not everyone leaves the service to raise dull sheep. Tommy folded his arms. Are you suggesting resurrection? I'm suggesting involvement, she countered. There was a long silence. Finally, Tommy placed both documents, the telegram and the envelope, on the centre of the desk, like pieces of a puzzle that refused to fit. What do you propose we do? Tuppence's eyes shone with the unmistakable flare of someone on the brink of mischief. We start by contacting someone who knows more than we do. And who might that be? Someone who hasn't forgotten Operation Dollhouse, someone who remembers the codes, someone who didn't retire to Devon. Tommy sighed. We always get dragged back in, don't we? We never left, Tuppence replied briskly. We were simply pretending. She grabbed her coat, smoothing the collar as though preparing for battle. Tommy followed more slowly, pausing to glance once more at the telegram lying innocently on the desk. Tuppence, he said softly, this could be serious. Her expression sharpened. Tommy, my dear, if someone thinks they can fool MI5... She reached for the door handle. They'll have to get through us first. The bell above the door gave a decisive ring as they stepped out, leaving the telegram behind, but not its shadow. You said it would be discreet, Tommy muttered, dodging a child wielding a wooden sword with the enthusiasm of an invading Viking. It is discreet, Tuppence replied airily. Nothing says espionage like pretending to admire porcelain teapots while being jostled by an overexcited 5-year-old. The Notting Hill Antiques Fair spread across the square in a cheerful sprawl of colour and chatter. Brass lanterns swung lightly on their hooks, toys clattered under small feet, and stall holders offered everything from tarnished silverware to Victorian postcards with faded ink. It was all terribly ordinary, deliberately, suspiciously ordinary. Tommy kept his hands in his coat pockets, eyes alert. Remind me again why a top-secret coded message would send us to a place selling old chamber pots. Tuppence didn't answer. She had gone still, her gaze fixed on a stall featuring antique maps. A woman in a canary-yellow coat stood with her back to them, the fabric bright as a flare among the muted browns and greys of the fair. Her posture was relaxed, but her head tilted ever so slightly each time Tommy or Tuppence moved. There, Tuppence murmured. Tommy followed her gaze. Striking coat. Reckless, if she's trying to be subtle. She isn't trying to be subtle, Tuppence said quietly. She wants us to see her. The woman lifted an old map to the light, examining it with exaggerated interest. Then she shifted her weight, perfectly matching Tommy's step as he adjusted his position. "Good grief," Tommy whispered. "She's copying me." "She's watching us," Tuppence corrected. "Through that reflection." She pointed discreetly to a brass compass on the table, polished enough to serve as a small mirror. In it, the woman's eyes were unmistakably fixed on them. Tuppence set off before Tommy could protest. She didn't walk so much as glide, giving the impression of a casual browser while closing the distance with measured precision. Tommy followed, weaving around a stall selling grandfather clock pendulums. The woman didn't turn. She simply shifted aside as though making room. Then, in one swift motion, she brushed past Tuppence. A whisper of citrus perfume lingered as her hand flashed near Tuppence's handbag. By the time Tuppence felt the light movement against the clasp, the woman was already gone, disappearing into the crowd with a confidence that suggested long practice. "Did she?" "Yes," Tuppence said firmly. "Check the bag." They stepped aside into a thinner part of the fair, half hidden by a stand of dusty Venetian masks. Tuppence opened her handbag with swift, controlled movements. Inside lay a folded slip of paper. Tommy exhaled through his teeth. This is beginning to feel less like a coincidence and more like an audition for paranoia. Tuppence opened the note. Her shoulders stiffened. "Well?" Tommy asked. "Read it." She handed it to him. The message was written in a sharp, unmistakably hurried script. "MI5 has been infiltrated. Trust only the one who brings the dollhouse key." Below the message, taped neatly, was a tiny wooden key, clearly hand-carved, the grooves uneven, the grain visible. Tommy turned the key over. "This is absurd. Who carves a wooden key in the 21st? Oh, wait. No, we're dealing with dollhouse relics. Should have guessed." "Look at the detail," Tuppence said. "This isn't decorative. It's functional. It fits something." Tommy slipped the key carefully into his pocket. "All right. Yellowcoat leaves us a message. MI5 is compromised, and we're to trust some mysterious key-bearer. Splendid. What now?" "Now we look for her again." But the yellow coat was nowhere to be found. Not behind the lamps, not by the children's toy stall, not near the teacup collections. She had vanished completely into the fair, like a canary swallowed by a forest of brown feathers. Tuppence scanned the crowd, her eyes sharp and restless. Tommy watched her expression darken. It was the same expression she wore when she suspected a truth she didn't want to admit. "Tuppence," he said softly, "we'll find her." "We need to," she murmured. "That message, it wasn't written by a novice, or by a frightened woman. It was written by someone who knows how to give instructions." Tommy was about to reply when a stall vendor shuffled toward them, his apron frayed and his hands trembling slightly. He held a small velvet-lined box. "Excuse me," he said in a nervous whisper. "You're the Beresfords, aren't you?" Tommy straightened. "Depends who's asking." The vendor gave a tiny bow of apology. Well, she told me to give you this." He held out the velvet box with both hands, as though it might explode. Tuppence took it gently. "The woman in the yellow coat." He nodded quickly. "Yes, madam. She came by early, asked when you'd arrive, looked right at me with the sort of eyes that, well, make a man do as he's told." Tommy exchanged a glance with Tuppence. "What's inside the box?" he asked. "I didn't open it," the vendor insisted. "Didn't want to. She said it wasn't for me, said it was for the old agents. Then she left." Tuppence opened the lid. Nestled inside was a miniature porcelain sparrow, delicate as eggshell. A thin hairline crack ran down the side of its neck, barely visible unless one angled it toward the light. Tommy's voice was low. "Sparrow." Tuppence's grip tightened around the box. "This can't be random." The vendor shifted uneasily. "If it helps, she told me something else." Tommy leaned in slightly. "Yes?" The vendor swallowed. "She said, someone is watching from the shadows." He hesitated. "Someone you once worked with." Tuppence's head snapped up. "Who? Did she say who?" "No, madam. She seemed, well, afraid to say more." Tommy placed a reassuring hand on the vendor's shoulder. "Thank you. Truly." The man nodded once, then scurried back to his stall as though escaping a storm. Tuppence closed the velvet box with a soft click. The sound settled oddly in the air, as though sealing something much larger than porcelain. "Tommy," she murmured, This woman knows exactly what she's doing. And she knows things we haven't told anyone outside the service, Tommy added, which means she's been watching us a long time. Tuppence slipped her arm through his, her grip tight, not frightened but resolute. Someone is playing a dangerous double game, and the only way to win is to stay ahead. Tommy nodded. Then we'd better find out who the one with the dollhouse key is before midnight. As they walked away from the fair, Tuppence looked back once, scanning the crowd for a flash of yellow. All she saw was ordinary life. Children laughing, coins clinking, the drift of cheerful voices. But beneath it pulsed a warning, sharp as the crack in the porcelain sparrow. "I don't trust that bird," Tommy announced. The porcelain sparrow sat in the centre of their office table, lit by the amber glow of a desk lamp. Its cracked neck caught the light in an unsettling way, as though it were looking back at them. Tuppence, perched on the arm of the sofa with her handbag open beside her, sorted through the day's clues with the practiced efficiency of a woman accustomed to chaos. "You don't need to trust it," she replied, tapping her pen thoughtfully. "You simply need to assume it's dangerous." That's hardly reassuring. It wasn't meant to be. Tommy continued to catalogue each item: the miniature key, the velvet-lined box, the cryptic note, the smudged telegram, and the envelope from the forgotten file. Stacked together, they formed a curious, unsettling collection, half relic, half riddle. The office felt strangely alive tonight. The usual quiet was replaced by the soft shuffle of papers, the faint clink of Tommy's pencil against porcelain, and the distant rumble of London settling into its evening routines. A sense of movement pulsed beneath it all, the feeling that someone had nudged a long-forgotten door in their past, and it was now swinging wide open. Tuppence leaned forward. "We're being led somewhere, Tommy. Step by step. Breadcrumbs." "Or bait," he countered. Before she could answer, a sharp, rapid knock rattled the office door. Tuppence froze mid-breath. Tommy set down the sparrow. The knock came again, brisk, impatient, authoritative. "That," Tuppence whispered, "is not a neighbour." Tommy straightened his jacket. "Whoever it is, we're not home to solicitors or door-to-door violinists." He opened the door. Two men stepped in without waiting for permission. "Mr. Beresford," the older one said, smiling thinly. "Mrs. Beresford." The younger man nodded, eyes cool and assessing. Both wore dark suits, crisp, immaculate, indistinguishable from every other government shade of charcoal grey. But beneath the fabric and politeness was a tension so sharp it felt like a third presence in the room. Tommy kept his voice cordial. "And you are?" Neither presented identification. Tuppence's eyes narrowed. The younger man spoke first. "We're with MI5. The older added, "Internal operations." Tommy raised an eyebrow. "Of course you are." "We're here," Dalka continued, "regarding a telegram received earlier today, and an object passed to you at the Notting Hill Antiques Fair." Tuppence crossed her arms. "You mean the porcelain sparrow?" The younger man's reaction was too fast, a flicker of surprise before he smoothed it away. "We'd like to see it." Tommy didn't move aside. "We'd like to know why." The older man smiled with a patronizing tilt of the lips. "Internal matters, Mr. Beresford. Classified." "No operation is classified from the people you're interrogating about it," Tuppence said sweetly. The younger man stepped deeper into the room, eyes scanning every surface, the lamp, the files, the sparrow. His movements were precise, almost rehearsed. "This is a matter involving national security." "Isn't everything?" Tommy murmured. The older man turned toward them. "A rogue double agent has resurfaced. Codename Sparrow. Believed dead years ago. His objective is to destabilize operations by feeding false intelligence. It appears he, and possibly others, have involved you." "How flattering," Tuppence said mildly. The clock on the wall ticked loudly into the weighty silence. Dalka gestured toward the sparrow. "We'll need to take the object, and the telegram, and any notes you've made." Tommy crossed his arms. "MI5 protocol requires written authorization for evidence removal." Dalka blinked. Harrow frowned. Tuppence smiled very slightly. "You didn't expect us to still know the rules?" Harrow cleared his throat. "The situation is urgent." "So is breakfast," Tommy replied. "Yet you don't see me storming cafes and seizing eggs at gunpoint." Dalka stiffened. "We have authority." "Shown where?" Tuppence cut in. Not on the table, not in your pockets, not in your hands, and oddly enough, neither of you introduced your ranks. Harrow's jaw tightened. Dalka looked as though someone had pulled a thread loose inside him. Tuppence leaned casually on the back of a chair, but her voice was clear, crisp and unwavering. If you want evidence, you'll provide documentation. Otherwise, you're welcome to leave. A pause. Then Harrow exhaled. Very well. We'll return with papers. Tommy stepped aside just enough to allow them through the doorway. Dalka paused at the threshold, gaze flicking to the porcelain sparrow again. Be careful whom you trust, he said quietly. Sparrow isn't the only one hiding. Tuppence smiled without joy. We never trust anyone who gives unsolicited advice. Dalka's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes flickered. Irritation, recognition, warning. Then the two men stepped out into the corridor. The door shut behind them with a soft, definite click. For several seconds, neither Tommy nor Tuppence moved. Dust motes drifted lazily in the lamplight, the previous argument still vibrating faintly in the air. Finally, Tommy spoke. Well, that was unpleasant. Tuppence walked to the window, watching their visitors disappear down the street. They weren't MI5, Tommy joined her. Not even close. Real agents show identification first, Tuppence said, and they don't flinch when you challenge their authority. Tommy nodded. Dalka's questions were too polished, memorized, not natural. Tuppence turned back toward the room. Let's check if they left anything behind. They searched the small office, efficiently but thoroughly, opening drawers, checking under papers, even examining the underside of the table as Tommy muttered darkly about sticky tape and clandestine microphones. Nothing. Then Tuppence froze. Tommy! She bent down, reaching beneath her chair. When she straightened, she held a torn scrap of paper, small, jagged at the edges, stamped faintly with a watermark. A visitor log, she murmured. MI5 visitor records. Look. Tommy took it. The torn scrap listed 2 entries, both marked with times and signatures, but the times weren't right. These were filed yesterday afternoon, Tommy said, frowning, but Dalka said they'd been dispatched immediately after the telegram arrived. Which was this morning, Tuppence said. Meaning, Tommy finished. They lied the moment they stepped through the door. Tuppence sat slowly, the significance settling like a curtain falling over a stage. Someone wanted us to believe MI5 was on our trail. Someone wanted us frightened, distracted. Or compliant, Tommy added. She sighed. I hate being manipulated. He set the sparrow down with exaggerated gentleness. I hate people breaking into our office dressed like overripe undertakers. They weren't MI5, Tuppence said firmly. They were trying too hard to pretend. Tommy leaned back against the desk. So the man at the fair, the woman in the yellow coat, the telegram, the safe house clue, they're all part of the same web. Tuppence nodded. A web someone is weaving around us with remarkable care. Tommy traced the crack in the sparrow. If those two were MI5, yes? He met her eyes. I'm the King of England. Tuppence smiled grimly. Long live His Majesty. Now let's find the truth before someone else comes knocking. Deborah Langley will either be delighted to see us, Tuppence declared, or she'll throw a typewriter at your head. Tommy paused halfway up the final staircase of the Kensington townhouse. My head? Why mine? You've always had a remarkable talent for irritating her. Irritating is a strong word. Not strong enough. Tommy sighed, straightened his jacket and knocked. From inside came the unmistakable clatter of something large and metallic falling over, followed by a muttered oath in a voice he instantly recognized. Well, Tuppence said cheerfully, she's alive. The door opened a crack. A bright blue eye peered through it, sharp as a hawk's. Which one of you knocked? Demanded Deborah Langley. Both, Tuppence replied warmly. The door swung open the rest of the way. Miss Langley stood framed in the entryway, short and wiry, wrapped in a cardigan that appeared to be more pockets than actual fabric. Knitting needles jutted from the folds like weapons, and her grey hair was swept into a bun that defied gravity. You're late, she said. We didn't actually make an appointment, Tommy pointed out. Then you're early. Either way, inconvenient. Come in. They stepped inside. Deborah's flat was exactly as Tommy remembered. a glorious battleground between domesticity and intellectual chaos. Stacks of knitting wool occupied entire chairs, books teetered on every available surface. Dusty typewriters sat like retired soldiers waiting for their next mission. The faint scent of lavender polish mingled with something mechanical, oil from old printing machines. A cat lounged on a pile of unfinished scarves, blinking as if judging them for intruding. "Well," Deborah said briskly, closing the door with a snap, "show me." Tuppence exchanged a quick look with Tommy, then drew the tiny wooden key from her handbag. Deborah stepped forward before it had even cleared the clasp. "Where did you get that?" Her voice dropped to a low, dangerous whisper. "At the antiques fair," Tuppence said, "from a woman we've never seen before. She knows about Operation Dollhouse." Deborah's expression changed, not subtly, not gradually, but like a curtain being yanked down over a stage. Her eyes sharpened, jaw tightening as she snatched the key with surprising force. "Ridiculous," she muttered, turning it over in her fingers. "Absolutely ridiculous. They said all the pieces were destroyed." "Who said?" Tommy asked. "MI5. The very same geniuses who kept half their intelligence notes in biscuit tins and called it security." She held the key up to the lamplight. "This is real." "So you recognize it?" Tuppence pressed. Deborah's nostrils flared. "I helped design it." That earned a full silence. Deborah thrust the key back at them. "You shouldn't have brought it here." Tommy held up his palms. "We didn't exactly have a choice. People keep handing us mysterious items and coded messages like we're hobbyists with a subscription to Spy Monthly." Deborah ignored him entirely. She began pacing, stepping around scattered papers with practiced ease. "Operation Dollhouse was never meant to resurface." Tuppence moved before Tommy could speak. "Tell us everything." Deborah stopped abruptly. She closed her eyes for a moment and inhaled, as if inhaling the past itself. "Operation Dollhouse," she began, "was a containment mission, not espionage in the romantic sense. No handsome foreign agents or rooftop chases. It dealt with something far more tedious and therefore far more dangerous." "Microfilm," Tommy guessed. "Microfilm," Deborah confirmed. "Someone on the inside, an embedded courier, smuggled intelligence out through children's toys. Hollow dolls, miniature furniture, wind-up animals, all with compartments perfectly sized for film strips." "And Sparrow?" Tuppence asked. Deborah's lips compressed into a thin line. "Sparrow was the code name of the courier, a ghost in the system. Never seen, never confirmed. MI5 announced he'd been killed during an extraction gone wrong." "That sounds like a lie," Tommy said. "It was," Deborah said unapologetically. "He disappeared. We lost the trail, and rather than admit a security breach, the higher-ups declared the matter closed." Tuppence leaned forward. "So Sparrow could still be alive." "Alive," Deborah said grimly, "and active." Tommy glanced around the cluttered room. "The key?" Deborah nodded at it. "The dollhouse keys open compartments in the original safe house. The headquarters was beneath a toy shop. Very appropriate, very theatrical. We used to joke about it, except nobody's laughing now." Tuppence absorbed that. "So, the telegram refers to the toy shop." "Oh, it's worse than that," Deborah said. She moved to a battered sideboard and pulled out a folder thick with yellowing pages. "The address in that code isn't just the toy shop. It's the basement beneath the basement. A place we never told recruits about. A place Sparrow knew." "Why send us?" Tommy asked. Deborah looked at him with something like pity. "Because you two were involved during the early days. You saw things you shouldn't have, and someone, Sparrow or otherwise, wants to use you now." Tommy rubbed the back of his neck. "We're being herded." Tuppence's brow furrowed. "Which means someone intends us to find something." "Or lead someone else to it," Deborah countered. She closed the folder sharply. "You must listen carefully," she said, eyes moving between them. "Whoever sent the telegram wants you to feel chosen, important, necessary. But you're not. You're pawns." Tuppence bristled. "We've never been pawns." "You are now," Deborah said without flinching. "And Sparrow, he never worked alone." Tommy felt the air shift. The room suddenly seemed smaller than before, the heaps of paper looming like silent witnesses. "Who?" he asked. "Who helped him?" Deborah hesitated, the first true hesitation they'd seen from her. "There were rumours," she said, But rumours in intelligence work are as plentiful as the knitting wool in this room. Who? Tuppence repeated, her tone harder. Deborah didn't answer. Instead, she walked to the window, pulling the curtain aside just enough to peer out. It was not the action of someone reminiscing. It was the action of someone checking for shadows. Tommy exchanged a look with Tuppence. His stomach tightened. "Deborah," he said quietly, "you're frightened." Deborah let the curtain fall back into place. She didn't turn. "Of course I'm frightened. You think I haven't spent years pretending not to look over my shoulder? Operation Dollhouse was a trap from the beginning. We merely didn't know for whom." She wiped her hands on her cardigan, a small, restless gesture. Tuppence softened her voice. "If you know who's involved, you must tell us." Deborah turned then, and for the first time there was something brittle in her expression. "If I say it aloud, I make it real." Tommy stepped closer. "Deborah, no," she snapped. "I've said enough. More than enough. What you need is caution, not courage." "Courage hasn't failed us yet," Tuppence said quietly. "Courage is what gets good people killed," Deborah answered. The cat on the scarves shifted as though disagreeing. Deborah took a breath, composing herself, and moved toward the door. "You should leave. Immediately." Tuppence blinked. "Just like that?" "Yes," Deborah said. "If Sparrow is active, you must assume every contact, every message, every lead is a manipulation." Tommy watched her hands. They were trembling slightly as she reached for the door handle. "That telegram," he said. "You recognized the code instantly." Deborah didn't deny it. Tuppence stood. "You know exactly who sent it." Deborah's voice sharpened. "Leave." She opened the door, too fast, too forcefully. Tommy stepped into the hallway. Tuppence lingered. "Deborah," Tuppence said softly, "you're hiding something." Deborah stiffened, a barely perceptible motion. "Good night," she said, and she shut the door firmly, the latch sliding home with a certain finality. Too certain. On their way down the stairwell, Deborah had burst the door open once more, just long enough to shove a slim metal tool into Tommy's hand. "For the shop," she muttered. "Old locks never retired either." Then the door snapped shut again. Tommy stared at the closed door. "Well," he murmured, "that felt like being pushed off a cliff politely." Tuppence exhaled slowly. "She knows more than she said." "And she's terrified." Tuppence linked her arm with his as they descended the stairs. "Which means the danger is real." Tommy nodded. "And close." At the bottom of the stairwell, Tuppence paused, looking back up toward the closed door. "She locked it too quickly," Tuppence whispered. "Far too quickly." Tommy met her gaze. "She's hiding something," Tuppence said. And this time, Tommy didn't disagree. "I don't like it," Tommy said. "That's the theme of the week," Tuppence replied. They stood at the corner of a quiet Camden street. Most storefronts were dark by now, their windows papered over, their signs peeling from years of neglect. But the one directly before them, an old toy shop whose painted lettering had long faded, held the peculiar stillness of something pretending to sleep rather than truly resting. The sign above the door read Hargrave's Toy Emporium, though the H and E were missing, leaving Argrav the Toy Emporium as if the shop itself had been partially erased. Tommy leaned in slightly. "Closed for 20 years, Deborah said." "Lights don't flicker in dead buildings," Tuppence answered. As if responding, a soft, diffused glow pulsed once behind the dusty curtains. "And that," she added, "is our invitation." Tommy exhaled heavily. "Every instinct I have screams, don't." "Which means we're exactly where Sparrow wants us," Tuppence said, gripping the tiny wooden key in her pocket. "And where we need to be." Tommy pushed the door. It didn't budge. He tried again. Still locked. Tuppence stepped forward and pressed her hand to the faded wood. "There's a draft." A faint metallic smell drifted out from beneath the door, unsettling, cold, and chemical. It reminded Tommy of engine rooms and disused cellars, places that held secrets for too long. "There," Tuppence whispered suddenly. A soft melody floated through the slit beneath the door, thin, tinny, and unmistakably mechanical. The lilting chime of an old wind-up carousel, playing a tune meant to delight children but now warped by time into something eerie. "That's not a good sign," Tommy muttered. "It's a clue," Tuppence corrected. Tommy reached into his pocket and retrieved the small metal tool Deborah had insisted they take with them, just in case old locks are stubborn, she had said. With careful pressure, he coaxed the toy shop's ruined latch until it clicked open. The door creaked, theatrically, almost resentfully, and they stepped inside. The interior was thick with dust, the moats swirling in the dim light like tiny ghosts awakened by the disturbance. Shelves lined the walls from floor to ceiling, filled with toys that might once have been charming. Wooden trains with peeling paint, music boxes missing crank handles, porcelain dolls whose eyes stared blankly into nothingness. "Cheerful," Tommy said under his breath. "Try again with a straight face," Tuppence murmured. Only one thing broke the stillness. A narrow, clean path sliced through the dust on the floor. Someone had walked through recently, and deliberately. "Tommy," Tuppence whispered. "Someone prepared this for us." He nodded grimly. The path led toward the back of the shop, where a half-open door revealed a staircase descending into shadow. The soft carousel music drifted up from below. As they approached, the metallic scent grew stronger. Tommy hesitated. "Tuppence, if this is a trap—" "It is," she said simply, "but we'll spring it carefully." They descended the stairs. Each step creaked underfoot, loud in the small space, loud enough to betray every movement. The air grew cooler as they descended, the smell sharpening into something unmistakably artificial, as if machinery had been left to rust in the dark. At the bottom was a small, low-ceilinged room, illuminated by a single bare lamp, an old bulb swinging slightly on its wire as though disturbed moments before their arrival. Tommy inhaled sharply. Tuppence stepped forward. In the center of the room sat an elaborate miniature dollhouse, beautifully crafted, intricately detailed, and horribly familiar. "That's it," she whispered. "The training model." Every MI5 recruit from the old division knew the design, the hidden staircases, the secret compartments, the false walls. It had been used to teach them how to spot concealed spaces in enemy hideouts. The dollhouse was identical to the one Tuppence had studied during her earliest field training, but this one was real, touched by dust, marked by time, and quietly humming with menace. The carousel music faded to silence. They approached cautiously. Tommy examined the base of the dollhouse. "There's a compartment beneath the staircase. Deborah said the key fits there." Tuppence knelt and ran her fingers along the tiny wooden steps. She found the small indentation and inserted the wooden key. It clicked. The compartment slid open with a soft sigh. Inside lay 3 objects: a folded coded map, a photograph of the woman in the yellow coat, and a list of MI5 names, each one neatly crossed out in red ink except one. Tuppence's gasp sliced through the stillness. Tommy's name, Tommy Beresford, was the only one left untouched. "Tuppence," he said quietly, "this is not ideal." "It's a frame job," she whispered. "Sparrow isn't only resurfacing. He's rewriting the past. He's setting you up." Tommy studied the list. Some of these names, these were real agents, Deborah's contacts, Langley's unit. Tuppence examined the photograph. "She left this for us. The woman in the yellow coat. Why?" "To warn us," Tommy said. "Or to push us," Tuppence countered. "Everything so far, the key, the porcelain sparrow, the telegram, it's too orchestrated, too precise." Before Tommy could answer, a loud metallic clank echoed from above. Tuppence snapped upright. "Tommy?" The door at the top of the stairs slammed shut. A lock turned. Once. Twice. Tommy raced to the base of the stairs and looked up. "We're sealed in." Tuppence's eyes darted around the room. "No, there has to be." A soft clicking sound interrupted her, rhythmic, mechanical, the carousel. Tuppence spun, eyes wide. The old wind-up carousel in the corner, the one they'd assumed was merely playing music, had begun to turn. Slowly at first, then with gathering speed. Tommy's voice hardened. "Tuppence! That smell, it's gas." The clicking grew louder. Tuppence grabbed his arm. "We have to find a way out, now." Tommy inhaled cautiously. The air had shifted. A faint sharpness lingered beneath the metallic scent, subtle but unmistakable. "Tuppence," he said urgently, This whole place is rigged. They ran to the walls, searching for seams or vents. Tommy pushed at a wooden crate, revealing a section of brick with a hairline crack. "There," Tuppence said. "Help me." Together they heaved the crate aside. The brick panel shifted, not enough to open, but enough to reveal what lay behind it. A narrow tunnel. "Smuggling passage," Tommy said. "Should have guessed the old place would have one." "Probably illegal," Tuppence replied breathlessly. "Marvellous." They heard another click, harsher this time. The lamp flickered. Gas began seeping invisibly now, thin curls like pale threads winding through the air. "Tuppence!" She shoved him toward the opening. "Go!" He crawled into the tunnel, twisting sideways to pull her with him. Behind them, the carousel music resumed, faster, discordant. Once they were inside the narrow tunnel, darkness wrapped around them. The only light came from the failing lamp behind them. Tuppence pushed the brick panel back into place. "If someone sees the passage open—" "We'd better hope they don't," Tommy finished. The tunnel was cold and close, the air stale. They crawled forward, guided by instinct and the faintest draft ahead. At one point the ceiling dipped so low Tommy had to flatten himself entirely against the ground. "Not how I imagined spending my evening," he muttered. "Darling," Tuppence said breathlessly behind him, "you once took me to a dinner party hosted by a woman who collected taxidermied ferrets. I assure you, this is progress." Tommy allowed himself a short laugh, mostly shock, partly relief. Finally, the tunnel sloped upward. A loose wooden hatch gave way beneath Tommy's shove, and cool night air spilled over them like a blessing. They climbed into a deserted back street, narrow, dimly lit, empty. The toy shop loomed at the end of the alley, silent and still. Tuppence leaned against the wall, catching her breath. That was no warning. "No," Tommy said. "That was an execution attempt." "Or the appearance of one." Tuppence ran a hand through her hair. "If Sparrow wants MI5 to think you're dead, trapping you inside an old safe house would do it." "But why frame me at all?" Tommy asked. Tuppence held up the list of crossed-out names. "Because you're the only one left, and if Sparrow's creating a narrative, he needs a final villain." Tommy stared at the dark toy shop. "He's writing a story where I'm the traitor." Tuppence took his hand, firm, unwavering. "Well," she said softly, "then we'll rewrite it back." They stepped away from the tunnel hatch, the porcelain sparrow crack, the wooden key, the gas trap, each detail weaving itself into a far more dangerous pattern. The frame job had begun, and someone in the shadows knew exactly what they were doing. "She's here!" Tuppence didn't shout it. She didn't gasp it. She simply said it the way a chess master announces checkmate. Quiet, decisive, unarguable. Tommy followed her line of sight across the pavement near Regent's Park. London moved at its usual unhurried pace. Couples strolling, nannies shepherding prams, a cyclist ringing his bell, someone walking a dog far too small to be called a dog at all. Nothing looked out of the ordinary. Except one thing. A flash of canary yellow fabric disappearing into a narrow bookshop between a florist and a tea room. Tommy's shoulders tensed. "Are you absolutely certain?" "Yes," Tuppence said. Her posture, her stride, the tilt of her head. "That's her." Tommy exhaled. "All right, then we follow." They crossed the street, weaving between pedestrians. The shop's sign, Rewley and Finch Antiquarian Booksellers, creaked faintly overhead. Its windows were fogged with old paper dust, and the dim interior glowed with warm amber lamplight. Tuppence pushed the door open. A small brass bell chimed overhead, gentle, almost apologetic. The smell struck them immediately. Old paper, dried glue and lemon polish, all layered into an aroma that suggested stories long forgotten and stories half hidden. Inside, the shop was a maze. Tall shelves rose like wooden cliffs, stacked with leather-bound volumes, cracked spines and maps rolled into soft curls. Narrow aisles twisted through the space like secret tunnels. "She came this way," Tuppence whispered. Tommy nodded. There was no mistaking the faint ripple of yellow fabric turning a corner ahead. But when they reached the first aisle, the woman was gone. Tommy frowned. "She moves fast." "She's had practice," Tuppence murmured. "Cipher runners don't linger." They moved deeper, the bell above the door now muffled by rows of books. Their steps were hushed on the worn carpet. Tuppence scanned each aisle carefully, reading shadows and angles the way others read headlines. A bookshelf shifted slightly, someone brushing against it. Tuppence darted left. Tommy followed, and there she was. The woman in the yellow coat stood between two towering shelves, back partially turned as though she'd only just realized she was cornered. Her coat, vibrant in the dim shop, made her look like a bright marker in a world of muted browns and greys. Her hands were clenched at her sides, one gripping the strap of a leather satchel. Her eyes, sharp, wary, intelligent, flicked between Tommy and Tuppence. "You followed me," she said softly. "You left us a breadcrumb trail," Tuppence replied. "It would have been rude not to." The woman's expression tightened. "I hoped you would come, and feared it." Tommy stepped forward. "We need your name." The woman hesitated, then spoke with quiet resolve. "Elise Marwood." Tuppence inhaled. "I know that name." "You should," Elise said. "I worked as a cipher runner under MI5's internal operations wing." Tommy nodded. "Special Communications Division, off-book messages, no trace in the main files." Elise's mouth curved into a faint, humorless smile. "Yes, invisible work. The kind of work that never earns medals but carries the heaviest consequences." Tuppence studied her. "You slipped that note into my handbag at the antiques fair. Why?" "Because you needed to know what Sparrow was planning." Tommy folded his arms. "You knew Sparrow was alive all along." "I didn't," she said quickly. "Not until he contacted me. I thought it was official MI5 business, an urgent warning meant to reach you." Tuppence frowned. "He told you MI5 wanted us warned?" "Yes. He said there was a breach, that your lives were in danger, that I needed to get the message to you discreetly." Elise's voice shook, barely perceptible. "But then I saw the pieces didn't match. His cover was too perfect, his instructions too curated." "And you realized he wasn't with MI5 at all," Tuppence finished. Elise nodded. "By then it was too late. I was already caught in his net." Tommy's jaw hardened. "Sparrow is manipulating the entire board. Using us, using you, using everything he learned before he vanished." Elise looked down as though ashamed. "He told me you were the only ones who could help him identify a mole in MI5. Tommy and Tuppence exchanged a look. "That's clever," Tuppence said. "Convince a cipher runner to act on false authority, let her deliver clues, and use her to keep us dancing." "But you caught on," Tommy added. Elise's voice was brittle. "He said he needed my help to expose a traitor. What he didn't say was that I was the help, not the ally." She met Tuppence's eyes. "I tried to break free. The message I slipped you today, that was not from him." Tuppence softened slightly. "Then you're not aligned with him anymore." Elise shook her head. "I never was. I simply didn't realize how deeply he was playing me." Tommy stepped closer. "What do you know about his current operation?" Elise hesitated. "More than I should have, less than I wish I did." She took a small breath. "Sparrow is alive, very much alive, and he's inside MI5's shadow networks, not officially, but through someone who is." Tuppence felt a chill. "A mole." "Yes," Elise whispered. "A highly placed one, feeding him information, covering his tracks and erasing his failures." Tommy clenched his jaw. "Which means he knows our movements." "And your history," Elise added. "He's preparing something, a misdirection so powerful it will make MI5 question its own foundations." Tuppence's fingers tightened. "He's framing Tommy." Elise nodded, slowly, with a sadness that suggested she wished she could deny it. "He's crafting the perfect double-agent narrative, and he's using truths as the foundation, real cases, real codes, real safe houses, all woven together in a way that implicates you without ever fabricating evidence." Tommy exhaled slowly. "Information is more dangerous than bullets." Elise looked down at her satchel. "There's something else." She reached inside and produced a photograph, the same one they'd seen in the toy shop, but uncreased, unmarked, original. "I took this," she said, handing it to Tuppence. "I thought he wanted surveillance, but he wanted something else." Tuppence examined the photograph. The woman in the yellow coat, Elise, stood in front of a building. She was the subject, no doubt, but her expression was slightly blurred, almost incidental. Elise said, "Look at the background." Tommy leaned in. "It's just a..." He stopped. Behind Elise, half hidden in the frame, was a clock tower, old stone, worn edges, and a large round clock face. The time on the clock read 11:55. Tuppence felt the prickling sensation of puzzle pieces sliding neatly into place. "Elise," she breathed. "This was taken just before Sparrow's threat." "Yes," Elise whispered, "before it sings at midnight. I didn't understand at first, but he left enough breadcrumbs for someone clever to follow. Someone like you." Tommy frowned. "Why would he give us a clue that leads to him?" Elise's eyes brimmed with fear. "Because he wants you to be there, Mr. Beresford. He wants you at the centre of the next blow." Tuppence's hand flew to her mouth. "He's orchestrating a scene," Elise continued. "One that proves you're the double agent. One that confirms MI5's suspicion." Tommy stiffened. "MI5 doesn't suspect." "They will," Elise said. "By the time Sparrow is done, they will." A soft creak echoed through the bookshop. Tuppence turned sharply. "Someone's here!" Elise froze. Her eyes darted toward the front of the store. "I shouldn't have stayed this long. He might have followed me. He watches everything." Tommy moved quickly. "Elise, you need protection. We can get you—" "No," she backed away. "The moment I stay with you, he has leverage. I'm safer disappearing." "Elise," Tuppence called. "Wait!" But Elise shook her head. "You have the clue you need," she whispered. "Find the clock tower. Find the truth before he writes it for you." Another floorboard creaked, louder this time. Elise's breath hitched. Without another word, she turned and slipped between the shelves, fast, silent, practiced. By the time Tommy and Tuppence reached the end of the aisle, she was gone. Only the faint scent of citrus lingered. Tommy listened for footsteps, for the bell above the door, for anything. Nothing. Tuppence clutched the photograph. "We're being pushed toward a specific moment, a specific time, a specific place." Tommy's voice was low. 11:55. Tuppence nodded slowly. 5 minutes before the Sparrow sings. "I hope," Tommy murmured, "that this is the last time a photograph tells us where to stand." Tuppence kept her stride brisk, her gaze fixed on the shadowy rise of the Kensington clock tower just ahead. The tower emerged between the narrow rows of terraced houses like a jutting spine of stone and iron. Its arches, cracked and uneven, framed the lower levels in sharp silhouettes. The hands on the clock face crept toward midnight with a patient inevitability. "You do realize," Tuppence replied, "that complaining about photographs telling you where to stand rather undermines your career as a detective. I prefer my clues written in legible ink, on a table, with tea." "You're in the wrong marriage, then." Tommy huffed, but a smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. The warmth of it fell away the moment they reached the first archway of the tower. Wind swept through the hollow space, catching on the jagged stone edges and rushing through like a deep exhale from an unseen lung. The sound carried the rhythm of the tower's internal ticking, a slow, resonant heartbeat echoing from its very bones. Tuppence touched the wall, fingertips brushing the carved grooves. This tower is older than it looks, and possibly less friendly, which makes it the perfect meeting place for someone who wants us on edge. Tommy stepped inside. The interior opened into a dim chamber where the beams and gears of the tower's mechanism filled the upper reaches like a suspended iron forest. A narrow staircase curved upward along the wall, its wooden railing worn smooth by decades of hands ascending toward trouble or timekeeping or both. "It isn't midnight yet," Tuppence said softly. "No," Tommy agreed, "but it will be soon." They moved deeper into the chamber. The glow from the lamp Tommy had brought cast long, uneasy shadows across the wooden gears. He lifted the beam to examine a large wheel embedded in the wall. At first glance it looked ordinary, just part of the clock's machinery, but something glinted on the inner spokes. "Tuppence," he said, lowering the lamp. She knelt beside him. "What is it?" He moved aside to show her the words carved into the wood. "A double agent fools by truth, not lies." Tuppence read it twice, her breath thinning. "That's Sparrow's writing." "It's consistent," Tommy agreed. He used the same phrase in one of the original Dollhouse reports. "Truth as a weapon," Tuppence murmured. "Truth that can be arranged, edited, curated. Enough of it, and you can build any lie you like. And he's building one around me." She placed a hand on his arm. "We'll stop him." The tower groaned, deep, heavy, ancient, as though disagreeing. Tommy angled the lamp toward the staircase. We need to go up. Sparrow always sets the true clue behind the misdirection. Tuppence nodded. Up we go. The first step creaked under Tommy's weight, protesting loudly in the silence. Tuppence followed, her footsteps quieter, but equally tense. The air thinned as they climbed. Dust danced through the narrow beams of lamplight, swirling like restless spirits unsettled by their intrusion. Halfway up, the tower's ticking grew more insistent, its rhythm synchronizing with the rise of their pulse. A draught whistled through the cracks in the stone, brushing Tommy's neck like a cold fingertip. They reached the first landing, a small platform overlooking the chamber below. Tuppence paused, gripping the railing. Look. On the floor was a faint smear, something darker than dust. Tommy knelt to inspect it. Blood, he said quietly. Tuppence's mouth set into a firm line. Someone else is here. Or was here. Before either could speculate further, the clock began to chime. The sound struck like an iron hammer, reverberating through their ribs. Midnight. 1, 2, 3, 4. Tommy counted silently, gripping the railing for stability as each toll rattled the stairs. 5, 6, 7. The chime masked a new sound, muffled, sharp, distinct. A gunshot. Tuppence's eyes snapped to Tommy's. That came from above. They moved before the 8th chime fully faded, climbing the next set of stairs at a near run. Dust billowed behind them. Wooden beams groaned overhead. The tower seemed to come alive around the vibrating clockwork. At the second landing they found the source. Agent Dalka slumped against the wall, one hand pressed to his shoulder, the fabric of his suit darkened by blood. His breath came in ragged pulls. Good, you came, Dalka rasped. Tuppence knelt immediately, pressing her handkerchief to the wound. Stay still. Tommy crouched beside him. Who shot you? Dalka swallowed painfully. Not Sparrow. MI5 was wrong. He's been fed lies. Someone on the inside. His voice broke, then softened into a strained gasp. Dalka, Tuppence urged. Who? Who on the inside? Dalka's eyelids fluttered, his expression contorting with agony. He tried to speak, the muscles of his jaw tightening with effort, but the last word never came. He slumped forward, consciousness slipping away like water through fingers. Tommy checked his pulse. He's alive. Barely, Tuppence answered. We need to call. A sound sliced through her words. A footstep, light, quick, deliberate, from above. Tommy rose instantly. Someone's on the top platform. Tuppence's eyes sharpened. Then we go. Together they ascended the final staircase. The steps were narrower here, the handrail splintered. The wooden frame vibrated with the final echoes of midnight's tolling. Halfway up, Tommy caught a flicker of movement, a shadow sweeping across the upper landing, fast and silent. There, Tuppence hissed. They reached the platform. The space was small, open on 3 sides, with low stone walls overlooking the rooftops of Kensington. Moonlight silvered the edges of the city. A faint breeze tugged at Tuppence's coat. Tommy scanned the area. He's close, Tuppence pointed. Look, the ladder. Against the far wall stood a narrow metal ladder leading to the tower's highest maintenance ledge. It swayed slightly. He went up, Tommy said. They followed. The ladder creaked under their weight, but they climbed swiftly. At the top was a narrow beam walkway hugging the clock's exterior structure. The wind was sharper here, tugging at their hair and clothing. Beyond the ledge, rooftops stretched out in jagged angles, chimneys rising like crooked teeth. A figure darted across the beam ahead of them, fast, agile, wearing dark clothing that blended with the tower's shadows. Tommy gave chase. Tuppence, watch your footing, he called as he moved. Always do, she replied, matching his pace. The figure leapt onto an adjoining roof, landing with a precision that was almost inhuman. Then another, vanishing between the ridges and chimney stacks. Tommy reached the end of the ledge and stopped, breathing hard. He's gone. Tuppence reached him seconds later, her breath coming in sharp bursts. He knew the layout. He's used these rooftops before. Of course he has, Tommy murmured. Sparrow's whole life was built on escape routes. Not Sparrow, Tuppence said suddenly. Tommy frowned. What do you mean? She held up something small, metallic, catching the moonlight between her fingers. "What's that?" Tommy asked. "A cufflink," Tuppence said. "Dropped in the chase." She held it out. "Look at the engraving." Tommy examined the polished surface. A single initial curled elegantly across the metal. L. For a moment, neither spoke. The night pressed in around them, the ticking of the clock a distant metronome marking the gravity of the discovery. Tommy's throat tightened. "No, it can't be." Tuppence shook her head. "We can't say it yet, not aloud." "Because if we're right," Tommy whispered, "it changes everything." She closed her hand around the cufflink. "Let's get Dalka out of here," she said quietly. "He tried to warn us. Whatever name goes with that cufflink, he feared it." Tommy cast one last look over the rooftops. The shadowy figure had vanished, swallowed by the twisting maze of chimneys and slanted tiles. The only sound left was the deep, constant ticking of the clock behind them, counting down towards something larger, darker, and far more personal than either of them had imagined. "Whitehall always did smell faintly of varnish and suspicion," Tuppence remarked as she and Tommy approached the imposing building. Tommy gave her a sideways glance. "I think that's just the polish on the floors." "No, dear. Suspicion has an aroma. Sharp, a little sour. Same smell you get when someone hides biscuits in a sock drawer." "Why would anyone hide biscuits?" "Tommy, concentrate." They passed through the heavy double doors into the marble-floored lobby of MI5 headquarters. Clerks moved briskly against a backdrop of echoing footsteps and the quiet hum of phone lines. Every surface gleamed. Every face remained composed. But something felt wrong. The atmosphere was too controlled, too rehearsed, like a play where the actors knew the audience had arrived early. Tommy kept one hand inside his coat pocket, fingers brushing the cufflink they had found atop the clock tower. The engraved L felt heavier with every step. Tuppence scanned the hall with a detective's instinct. "We're expected," Tommy nodded. "Which means we're already behind." A young clerk approached. "Mr. and Mrs. Beresford, Senior Officer Langham will see you." Langham, the man whose initial matched the cufflink, the acquaintance from their early service days, the one who had always seemed too polished, too smooth, too unbothered by the messy realities of intelligence work. Tuppence's jaw tightened. The clerk guided them down a corridor lined with portraits of past intelligence officers. Tuppence noticed something new. Langham's portrait had been moved higher on the wall, a position of prominence. "How flattering," Tuppence murmured. Tommy whispered back, "Or incriminating." The door at the end of the corridor opened before they reached it. Langham stepped out, smiling like a host about to offer tea at a luncheon, rather than greet two operatives caught in the centre of a conspiracy. "Tommy, Tuppence, what an unexpected pleasure." Tuppence replied coldly, "We weren't aware pleasure was the objective." Langham's expression flickered, barely, but Tuppence saw it. Tommy wasted no time. "We need answers." "Answers to what?" Langham said easily. "You've been rather elusive lately." "Your agents, Dalka and Harrow, paid us a visit," Tuppence said. Langham's eyebrows rose. "Agents?" "They claimed to be MI5, Tommy added. "They weren't." Langham placed a hand on his chest in mock astonishment. "Surely you don't expect me to verify every lunatic who claims to represent the Crown?" Tuppence stepped forward, her voice steady. "Then how do you explain this?" She produced the cufflink. Langham's mask slipped, just a fraction, a millisecond. But Tuppence caught it, the colour shifting in his face, the twitch at the corner of his mouth, the brief widening of his pupils. Then he recovered, too quickly. "I lose accessories all the time," he said lightly. "You'd be amazed how slippery cufflinks can be." Tommy placed the cufflink into Langham's hand. This one was dropped by a man fleeing a shooting inside the Kensington clock tower. Langham closed his fingers around it. "A clock tower? How dramatic!" Tuppence studied him. His tone was mild, but the muscle in his jaw pulsed once, hard. Tommy produced the coded map, the list from the dollhouse safehouse, and Sparrow's carved message. "These were left for us, and someone wants to frame me." Langham laughed, a short, dismissive bark. "Tommy, honestly, you've always had a flair for melodrama." Tuppence replied sharply, "What we have is evidence. Evidence that all leads toward one conclusion." Langham smiled again, but this time there was a coldness behind it. "Let's not jump to conclusions. Come with me. We'll review your concerns with full access to internal files. He gestured toward a nearby corridor. Tommy hesitated. Tuppence whispered, "We follow, but watch everything." Langham led them down a quiet hallway lit by discreet wall lamps. No clerks, no chatter, just the hollow echo of their footsteps. He opened a door into a conference room. "Inside, please." Tommy and Tuppence stepped in. Langham closed the door behind them with a soft, deliberate click. The room was empty, except for a single dossier placed neatly on the table. Tuppence's stomach turned. Tommy approached the table, opened the dossier, and froze. Inside was a precise, methodically compiled case file, one that documented every step Tommy had taken over the last several days. Every clue, every location, every interaction, each piece twisted to imply guilt. Tuppence skimmed the pages. The toy shop, framed as a clandestine meeting place. The porcelain sparrow, interpreted as a signal to a handler. The map, described as route planning. The coded list, presented as Tommy's targets. Dalka's shooting, suggested as an elimination attempt by Tommy. And the final page, recommended action, immediate detainment of Thomas Beresford, operative designation Sparrow. Tuppence slammed the folder shut. "This is fiction!" "But well written," Langham said calmly from the doorway. They spun around. Langham leaned against the doorframe, arms folded, the cufflink still in his hand. "You see, the problem with truth," he said conversationally, "is that it's pliable. All it needs is the right angle." Tommy's voice was low and steady. "You're behind this." Langham gave an elegant shrug. "Behind? Ahead? Such linear thinking. No, Tommy, I am within it, steering the narrative, sculpting the story, and you've provided such wonderful material." He pressed a button on the wall. A shrill alarm blared instantly, reverberating through the corridor outside. "What have you done?" Tuppence demanded. "Set the record straight," Langham replied. "MI5 believes you're compromised, and I've just ensured they act on that belief." Footsteps thundered from outside. Voices barked orders. Tuppence grabbed Tommy's hand. "We need to move." Langham smiled victoriously. "Arrest them!" The door burst open as guards stormed in. Tommy seized the edge of the conference table and upended it, sending papers scattering into the air. The sudden chaos brought Tuppence the split second she needed. "Left!" she shouted. They dodged past the nearest guard, ducked under a grabbing arm, and sprinted down the hall. Alarms echoed through the building, bouncing off the marble floors. "This way!" Tuppence pointed toward a service corridor. Narrow, dim, purposely unnoticed. A place meant for cleaners and forgotten deliveries. They dashed through it, Tommy bracing the door behind them as guards tried to force it open. "Keep going," he said. They ran through the corridor, turning corners blindly, guided only by instinct and desperation. The air thinned, the floor changed from marble to concrete. At last they reached a small record storage room, dusty, cramped, filled with shelves of old documents stacked like leaning towers. Tommy locked the door. Tuppence pressed her ear against it. Footsteps thundered past. "There has to be something here," Tommy whispered. "Something that proves Langham's involvement." Tuppence scanned the shelves. "Look for anything connected to Operation Dollhouse." They split up, searching frantically. Dust clung to their fingers. Papers rustled like dry leaves, old forms and forgotten files and yellowing memos. Tuppence pulled a box down and rifled through its contents. Her breath caught. "Tommy!" He rushed over. Inside the box were internal communications, letters, orders, transfer memos, all involving Langham. And something more. A hidden folder beneath the pile marked "Classified, Eyes Only." Tuppence opened it. Inside were documents showing Langham had been moving operatives, altering case files, redirecting investigations, all in ways that kept Sparrow out of reach, all dating back years. Tommy's face hardened. He's been manipulating MI5 from the inside. Tuppence found one final page, stamped with the dollhouse insignia. She read aloud, "Secondary agent assigned to Sparrow L." Tuppence's voice dropped. "L for Langham." Tommy closed the file slowly, as though sealing a coffin. "He isn't chasing Sparrow," he said quietly. Tuppence met his eyes. "Langham is Sparrow." "Are you sure you're ready for this?" Tommy asked. Tuppence tightened her glove. I've been ready since he sent that wretched telegram." They stood at the wrought iron gates of Langham's private manor, a sprawling, meticulously maintained estate tucked away behind a long row of manicured hedges. The house itself rose from the dark like a grand illusion, too quiet, too curated, too spotless for a man steeped in lies. Lamps glowed softly behind the frosted windows, lending the manor the unsettling air of a place expecting company. Tommy pushed open the creaking gate. "Let's hope the neighbours mind their own business." "Langham chose a place where nobody asks questions," Tuppence replied, "or where people are paid not to." The gravel path crunched under their shoes as they approached the entrance. The hedges surrounding the house were symmetrical, trimmed within an inch of their lives, forming patterns so exact they resembled military formations. Everything about the estate suggested control. Obsessive, rigid, suffocating control. Tuppence paused on the doorstep. He curated his garden the way he curated people. Tommy knocked. No answer. He tried the handle. Unlocked. They exchanged a look. "He's inviting us," Tuppence said. "Or expecting us," Tommy murmured. They stepped inside. The foyer presented itself like a museum. A row of antique clocks lined the walls, each frozen at a different time. A Victorian coat stand held a collection of hats, all identical, all Langham's. The faint scent of expensive wax polish mingled with something subtler, paper, dust, and the hint of cold metal. Tommy exhaled slowly. "He's been busy." Tuppence surveyed the immaculate hall. "He's been collecting." A narrow corridor stretched beyond the foyer, its walls adorned with framed maps, coded telegrams, and tiny shelves displaying miniature toys, each precisely positioned, each likely holding a hidden history. "Operation Dollhouse," Tuppence said softly. "He kept souvenirs." Tommy felt the unease deepen. "Let's keep our guard up." They moved room to room, stepping carefully, speaking in low whispers. In the first room they found a desk covered in old typewriters, each tagged with dates from past operations. Half-torn stencils lay scattered among them, marked with cipher keys. A stack of forged passports stood in a neat pile, arranged by nationality. "Years of covert work," Tommy said. "None of it sanctioned." "He was running his own MI5, Tuppence replied. "A shadow service." The next room was stranger still. Shelves of children's toys lined the walls. Wooden trains, porcelain figurines, miniature dolls. Each had a tiny compartment worked into its design, some obvious, some nearly invisible. Tuppence picked up a porcelain rabbit, turning it over in her hand. These weren't toys. They were couriers. Tommy opened a wooden soldier. Inside lay a strip of microfilm so old it had cracked along the edges. "He hid messages in plain sight," Tommy said. "Or carried them," Tuppence murmured, "right under everyone's noses." They pressed onward. A hallway led them toward a set of double doors at the far end. The doors were locked. Tommy raised an eyebrow. "Too easy." Tuppence knelt and examined the lock. Old-fashioned, handmade, he trusts his own craftsmanship more than modern systems. She withdrew a slim pick from her coat and worked quickly. The lock clicked open. "After you," Tommy said. "Ladies first? You must be feeling reckless." Inside the study, the air changed. It was colder, sharper, filled with the faint hum of electricity. The walls were lined with filing cabinets, tall, imposing, overflowing. But the far walls stole their breath. A mosaic of photographs covered it from end to end. Hundreds of prints arranged in chaotic precision. Tommy stepped forward. Most of the photographs were of him. Some were of Tuppence. Others were of the two of them together, in cafes, at train stations, walking through markets, returning from assignments. Photographs spanning years. Some grainy and distant, others disturbingly close, taken from angles that suggested someone standing only a few feet away. Tuppence pressed a hand to her throat. "He's been watching us, since before we knew Sparrow even existed." Tommy's voice was quiet, strained. "This isn't surveillance, it's obsession." He reached for one photograph, himself standing outside their old Chelsea flat, coat collar turned up, unaware of the camera aimed at him. The image trembled in his hand. Tuppence scanned the wall. He studied our patterns, our habits, our weaknesses. And he used them. In the centre of the wall hung a single photograph larger than the rest, the same one they'd seen in Elise Marwood's satchel, but clearer, crisp, untouched. Behind Elise was the clock tower, at 11:55, the prelude to Sparrow's message. Tuppence's jaw tightened. This was all staged. Tommy's voice hardened. Then he's staging this moment too. A door creaked behind them. They turned. Langham stood in the doorway, dressed impeccably in a dark suit, the same icy composure he wore at Whitehall. No guards, no accomplices, just him, calm, confident, dangerous. "Good evening," he said pleasantly. Tuppence stepped forward. "It's over, Langham." "Is it?" His smile flicked across his face like a blade. "I do apologize for the mess. I wasn't expecting guests, though I rather hoped you'd come." Tommy's eyes narrowed. "Why? To finish the frame job?" "Frame?" Langham laughed. "Tommy, you misunderstand me. I wasn't framing you. I was testing you." "Testing?" Tommy echoed incredulously. "Yes, to see whether you still had it. That edge, that instinct. I must say, you've exceeded expectations." Langham clasped his hands, delighted. The clock tower chase was exquisite. Your reactions were— "This isn't a performance," Tuppence snapped. "But it is," Langham replied. "Life is a performance. MI5 never understood that. They thought intelligence work was about paperwork and protocol. They underestimated me." Tommy met his gaze. "So you invented Sparrow?" Langham sighed wistfully. "Sparrow existed. Briefly, poorly, ineffectively. I improved him." "You killed the real Sparrow," Tuppence said, "and used his identity to hide your own operations." Langham smiled indulgently. "Of course I did. Can't run a shadow empire under one's own name. But I didn't kill Sparrow initially. I let him fail, then simply stepped into the void he created." Tommy's hands clenched. "You manipulated MI5 for years." "Manipulated?" Langham chuckled. "I guided them, gave them purpose. Without me, they would have floundered in bureaucracy." Tuppence moved subtly toward the larger desk, her fingers brushing against a stack of old transmitters. Langham continued, oblivious. "You see, being ordinary is the worst fate an intelligent man can endure. MI5 never saw my potential. Oh, they used me, certainly, but never valued me. They told me I was a cog, a function, replaceable." "Because you were," Tommy said. Langham's eyes flashed. "I was exceptional." "You were dangerous," Tuppence corrected calmly. "Not because you were clever, but because you thought you were owed brilliance." Langham exhaled slowly. "I suppose you're wondering why you two were chosen." Tommy said nothing. Langham smiled. "You were the ideal players, talented enough to be interesting, predictable enough to be useful, and known well enough that your downfall would create the perfect diversion." "For what?" Tuppence asked. Langham tilted his head. "For my exit, of course." Tuppence's fingers slid under the papers on the desk, feeling for something metallic. An old signal transmitter lay hidden beneath the files. Tommy kept Langham talking. "You plan to disappear." "I plan to evolve," Langham corrected. "Leave Sparrow behind. Let you take the fall. Elegant symmetry, really. You began your career solving cases, you'd end it as one." Tuppence pressed her finger against the transmitter's activation switch, a subtle, silent click. Langham moved toward the desk. "Enough now," he said. "Time for the final move." His hand drifted inside his coat. Tommy's breath stilled. Tuppence's hand tightened around the transmitter. A sound exploded through the room. Not a gunshot, but boots. Shouting. Doors slamming. Langham froze. Tommy grinned. "Expecting someone?" The study door burst open as real MI5 agents flooded inside, Dalka among them, arm bandaged but stance unwavering. "Langham," Dalka growled, "you're under arrest for treason, impersonation, obstruction, falsification of intelligence work, and suspected murder." Langham looked almost offended. "You activated a signal." Tuppence slipped the transmitter into her pocket. "You should dust your souvenirs. This one still worked." Langham lunged for the nearest drawer. Agents tackled him immediately, chaos erupting across the study. A porcelain rabbit shattered under the weight of a boot, papers scattered like startled birds. Langham screamed, a high, piercing sound devoid of dignity, as the agents pinned him. He fought like a man drowning. "You fools! They'll never understand what I built. They'll never—" His voice was muffled as they forced him down. Tommy and Tuppence stepped back, watching as MI5 wrestled Langham into restraints. A broken porcelain bird rolled across the floor and stopped at Tommy's shoe. Its neck cracked. Tommy picked it up. The faintest smile touched his lips. "Even the best counterfeit," he said softly, "breaks eventually." Tuppence slipped her arm through his. "And now they know who the real Sparrow is." Langham was dragged from the room, still shouting, still furious, still utterly defeated. Tommy placed the cracked porcelain sparrow on the desk and exhaled deeply. Tuppence leaned against him. "It's over." "For him," Tommy agreed, "but we still have a lot of explaining to do." She smiled. "We're quite good at explanations." They walked toward the door together. Behind them, the study of a double agent lay in ruins, a fitting grave for a man who built his empire on lies and destroyed himself trying to live up to his own legend. "Next time," Tommy announced, "I'm taking up pottery." Tuppence looked up from her armchair, one eyebrow elegantly raised. "Pottery?" "Yes, something relaxing, quiet, entirely devoid of double agents, underground toy shops, and men hanging off clock towers." "Darling, you'd break your first pot before it even hit the kiln." Tommy sighed with theatrical suffering. "You wound me, Tuppence." She smiled over the rim of her teacup, tired, affectionate, grateful to be back in familiar surroundings. The Beresfords' modest Bloomsbury office looked exactly as it had before Sparrow turned their world sideways. Shelves of case files leaning like old friends, stacks of correspondence on the desk, an armchair Tommy insisted was ergonomic, and the faint scent of furniture polish mingling with paper and the remnants of Tuppence's lavender biscuits. Papers lay scattered across the desk, remnants of Langham's downfall. MI5 had sent them official copies, the indictment list, the confession transcript, the internal review stamped with heavy ink. Yet despite the severity of the case, the office felt safe, ordinary, comfortingly theirs. Tuppence set down her cup. "Have they said when they're sending the final clearance?" Tommy nodded. "They already did, delivered an hour ago." He reached for an envelope partially buried beneath a pile of case notes. "Here it is." Tuppence read it, her expression softening, completely exonerated. "And," Tommy added dryly, "they offered us a commendation." Tuppence nearly choked on a laugh. "A commendation? After accusing you of treason and trying to arrest us in a broom cupboard?" Tommy folded the letter back into its envelope. "I politely declined." "Good. I prefer an apology basket of pastries." "A reasonable demand. Shall I request almond croissants?" "2," he grinned. For a long moment they sat in companionable silence, the kind that only comes after danger has passed, when adrenaline fades and exhaustion mixes with relief. Outside, the muffled hum of London drifted through the window, a reminder that life went on, unbothered by the fallen Sparrow. Tuppence reached for a small parcel sitting atop the inbox tray. "Oh, this came while you were filing away those rather dramatic forms." Tommy leaned forward. "Addressed from Elise?" "Yes." Tuppence carefully undid the brown paper wrapping. Inside lay a short letter and a delicate object wrapped in tissue. She unfolded the letter first. "Dear Tommy and Tuppence, thank you for saving more lives than you know. I'm leaving London for a while, somewhere quiet, somewhere Sparrow never touched. I wanted you to have this." Elise Tuppence peeled back the tissue paper, the miniature wooden key. Tommy exhaled softly. She kept it safe. Tuppence turned the tiny key in her fingers, smooth wood, slightly worn at the teeth, carved with precision. "Keys are strange things," she murmured. "They lock and unlock whatever we ask them to, but they're also so easy to lose." Tommy leaned back in his chair. "Meaning?" "Meaning," she said thoughtfully, "that people are keys too. They can open doors we'd never open on our own, and lock away truths we're not yet ready to face." She set the wooden key gently on the desk. Elise unlocked a great deal, more than she meant to. Tommy nodded. She also locked Sparrow out long enough to help us stop him. Tuppence sighed, and yet part of me wonders how long he'd been preparing for all of this. The photographs, the toys, the codes. Tommy picked up one of the MI5 folders. That's the cleverness of it. He never invented lies. He rearranged truth, real files, real operations, real contacts. And he placed you neatly in the center, Tuppence said softly. He knew enough to be dangerous, Tommy agreed, just not enough to win. Tuppence rose and crossed the room, placing her hand briefly on Tommy's shoulder. You know, she said, I don't think it was his genius that nearly fooled everyone. No? It was his pettiness. He used truth the way a child uses toys, breaking them, gluing them back together, insisting they're new. Tommy chuckled wearily. You're right. He wasn't brilliant. He was meticulous. And lonely, Tuppence added, surprising even herself. Tommy looked up at her. Come now, don't pity him. I don't, but I can recognize a mind twisted by being overlooked. Some people can survive being underestimated. Others make it their entire personality. Tommy reached up and squeezed her hand. Fortunately, we're in the first group. Speak for yourself, Tuppence laughed. The clock on the wall chimed softly, not a dramatic toll, just the small, punctual ring of an office clock doing its duty. Tommy let out a satisfied sigh. Do you realize, he said, this is the first time in days that no one has tried to kill us? Don't jinx it, Tuppence warned. He raised a hand in surrender. I take it back. She moved toward the window, pushing aside the curtain. Outside, the street lamps cast warm pools of light along the pavement. A dog trotted past a lamppost. A cyclist glided by. Normalcy. Tuppence leaned against the sill. Funny, isn't it? MI5 spends all its time trying to keep the world neat and ordered, but it's always people who cause the real chaos. Tommy glanced at the wooden key. I prefer gardening. Tuppence turned. You do not garden. I could learn. You'd kill 3 roses before lunch. Tommy lifted a file from the pile. Fine. Then you choose a hobby for me. Knitting, she said immediately. Tommy recoiled. Absolutely not. See, she teased. Espionage suits you better. He smiled warmly. I suppose espionage prefers us. A comfortable silence settled again as Tuppence returned to her chair. She reached for the porcelain sparrow, the one Tommy had saved from Langham's study, and set it gently beside the wooden key. A counterfeit and a clue, she mused, side by side. Tommy nodded. Rather poetic. Tuppence stretched her legs. Do we have anything left to file today? No, Tommy said. Just the satisfaction of not going to prison. Lovely, Tuppence replied, closing her eyes momentarily. A luxury we should enjoy. The piece lasted exactly 15 seconds. A soft shuffle sounded outside the office door. Not footsteps, not the distant clatter of the stairwell, but a deliberate movement. Then a shadow beneath the door, and finally the whisper of paper sliding across the floor. Tommy sat upright. Tuppence opened her eyes. They both stared at the envelope now lying on the carpet. Plain, cream-coloured, unmarked. Tommy stood cautiously. Did MI5 say they were sending anything else? They've already sent enough, Tuppence replied. He picked up the envelope. No return address, no seal. Tuppence joined him at the desk, leaning subtly closer. Open it, she said. Tommy tore the flap carefully and removed a single slip of paper. One line, handwritten in a neat, unfamiliar script. Some toys never stay in the attic. Tuppence's breath caught. Tommy stared at the message. It can't be. No, Tuppence murmured. It can, and it is. Tommy swallowed. But Langham is in custody. And whatever really happened to the original sparrow, Tuppence said slowly, was never proved. He met her gaze. Tuppence's eyes shone, not with fear, but with that rare mixture of dread and delight she only felt when standing at the threshold of a new mystery. Something stirring in the shadows, something unfinished. Tommy set the paper down gently. Well, he said, I suppose our quiet evening is ruined. Tuppence smiled. My dear, our evenings are always ruined. That's half the fun. Tommy exhaled, half laughing. Tea first? Always. She poured them each a cup. The porcelain sparrow watched silently from the desk. The wooden key lay beside it, glowing softly in the lamplight. Outside, the world continued its calm rhythm. Inside the Beresfords' office, the atmosphere was shifting, subtly, inexorably, toward the next case. Tuppence raised her cup. To toys, truth and trouble, Tommy clinked his cup against hers, and to attics that never stay shut. Their laughter mingled softly with the hum of the London night. The case was closed, almost.